kick it off to Ryan now to introduce our panelists.
Hey everybody, I'm Ryan Cahew, managing partner of Hugh and Bordenave. I've been practicing law for over 10 years. I know I don't look it, but yes, I've been doing a lot of transactional compliance work, and one of those is setting up and helping nonprofits, but also in terms of my enjoyment and downtime is sitting and assisting nonprofit boards I believe in or helping my friends out. And I'm joined by an awesome panel today of those friends. And what I'm going to do really quickly is briefly outline how this is going to flow. I'm going to do a brief introduction to them, but I'm going to talk about some of the major legal issues or just kind of a survey of topics that I as an attorney has seen in attorney discussion groups, or I myself have experienced assisting clients, or when people have asked me questions dealing with COVID for nonprofits. After that, I'm going to reopen and have the panelists more formally introduce themselves, and we're going to have more of an experiential and the practical, the day-to-day kind of decisions of where legal issues are kind of in the background, but this awesome panel faces it day to day. I'm only there for a telephone call or an email from my clients. But with that being said, we are joined by Bev Santos of the Hawaii Food Bank. Say hi. Oh, yeah. I was going to say wave hi. And we have Randy Soriano, who also is with me on the Alakai board for Hawaii Food Bank, but also leads the Hawaii E-Rotary Club. And then as last but definitely not least is the awesome and fantastic Leslie Yano of the American Heart Association. Say hi, panelists. Okay, they're going to get more of an opportunity to talk more than me, because yes, I know everybody loves hearing an attorney talk a lot, but as I said, we're going to jump into a short PowerPoint presentation kind of situation where I'm going to go over a survey of topics, legal issues and topics. But first, for the legal presentation kind of part, disclaimer, typical lawyer, right? We're only going over general information. As I said, it's a survey of things that have been going on. I think a lot of people have seen in the news that small businesses struggle, and sometimes they forget that nonprofits are actually businesses. It's just that the profit doesn't go to any kind of specific business owner, but they are functioning organizations that do a lot of good work in the community. So with that in mind, just remember as I'm going through some of these things that it's just basic legal information. Nobody should kind of take this information as specific legal advice, and you should always seek professionals, whether it be an attorney, sometimes it's also an accountant, or an HR professional to kind of help you navigate a lot of these legal and compliance issues. So with that in mind, let me jump into this brief survey of topics that I've kind of curated and selected. And the flow of it is top level things about bylaws, policies, and procedures, or how I kind of talk about nonprofit kind of governance, how things are run, or how the organization is set up. And then after that will be operating and fundraising, actually the guts and the day-to-day kind of management of a nonprofit organization. Oh yeah, by the way, my awesome assistant, Leilani, who is kind of responsible for graphics, the PowerPoint slide and everything. Wave hi, Leilani. Please feel free to ask questions in chat, but we're going to probably address those toward the end or intermix them with the panelist part of the discussion. If you do have questions on what I'm presenting in terms of legal issues, we can also address that towards the end through questions and answers. So feel free to ask questions. Leilani is watching out for them, and we can address them towards the end. Thanks, Leilani, and thanks everybody. Anyway, I'm going to jump into the nonprofit governance situation. And frequently when I'm assisting a nonprofit in a crisis, whether it is dealing with COVID-19 now, which is very new to all of us, is I usually get questions from board officers, directors, or executive directors asking, can we do this? And I usually will respond with, I don't know. I don't know what your bylaws say, what your policies and procedures and your handbook. But I usually start with the bylaws because the bylaws are the enforced, they're like the constitution for the nonprofit. And that's what officers and directors and executive directors should be turning to first start asking, can we do this, or how we can kind of make executive decisions or decisions on behalf of the organization, and whether it's quote unquote legal or not, is that usually your bylaws are going to be your guiding document. And anybody who sits on big boards or executive committees generally should know their bylaws, but sometimes there's an attorney or somebody who's a compliance type of person. And in a crisis or during COVID, there are a lot of situations where you're trying to respond very quickly to something, changing dynamics such as fundraising or reaching out to other organizations or doing whatever it takes to keep your organization going, and forgetting there's some things that you sometimes need the board to make voting or have meetings on, and you can't just upend the bylaws. You can't ignore them. So that is a lot of times where there is frequently friction, in the sense that some people in many organizations, smaller ones, they don't update their bylaws. So really quick kind of example, a lot of people's bylaws actually from older organizations, but smaller ones, don't allow for virtual meetings, because when they created their organization, there was no technology for Zoom or anything like that. And it was very specific because they were thinking about, they didn't want telephonic or fax. And so, or not fax, but telephonic kind of meetings and things like that. So actually, technically, your bylaws would be barring something like a Zoom conference unless you updated it. So that is just one minute example of how your bylaws can either impede or help you. And that's why you should be checking them about how to deal with crisis. So the next level down from bylaws are policies and procedures. And whether they be dealing with employees, like, so I'm glad Bev is joining from an employee kind of perspective of, because nonprofits are not only just run by boards. In fact, some boards are volunteer boards, and sometimes some boards are advisory boards. But the way people interact and deal with each other, especially now that we have had months of COVID safety guidelines where the government has changed those guidelines, and they're supposed to minimize the health and safety risks, the policies and procedures are often have to be checked, and sometimes you have to be cognizant of updating and writing notice, whether they're affecting your employees, your volunteers. It's not just about your board and how they choose to operate, but it is also, there's a lot of HR concerns. We were talking briefly before we started the webinar, and I was asking who was working from home. Bev, and thankfully for the food bank, because that's such an important thing, and they do great work for the state of Hawaii, is she's at the warehouse. So we're talking about health and safety for food distribution, because, right, you're interacting and we're trying to minimize the spread of COVID. And so analysis from the HR side definitely would take a look at policies and procedures. And again, those policies and procedures inform us how to kind of run board meetings as well. But biggest thing for policies and procedures, it's not just kind of what we attorneys do is throw up documents. I know people are like, oh, I don't have time to read all this. We usually create those because we want to protect the organization's tax exemption status And we also want to protect people's individual rights as they interact at organization. I bring this up because some of the biggest problematic issues that we face, and nonprofits are more regulated than some for-profit small businesses, exactly because of that tax exemption status from the IRS, is we care about self-dealing, conflicts of interest, and breach of contract matters. And all of that is guided by bylaws, policies, and procedures. And those in turn, the bylaws and policies and procedures are often created to satisfy IRS and local and state government things about giving this nonprofit tax exemption. And usually during in a crisis like COVID, all of that goes out the window. And a lot of times people in my position advising people is like, unfortunately, you're going to still have to abide by these things. Because, right, when we're in lockdown at the beginning of the year, people could not have quorum, people couldn't meet, or vendors and suppliers events got canceled. And right, sometimes you rely on your board, volunteer boards, especially comprised of experts or other people or people who own their own businesses to kind of step in. And the problem with that is sometimes is how did you vet the decision? Did you document the decision? Did you do your due diligence? All of that is some of the problems of self-dealing and conflicts of interest and breach of contract. So that's the top level stuff in a nutshell of what we've seen kind of people in terms of executive directors and board kind of managing the crisis, but also trying to keep their organization compliant. So dropping down to some of the nitty gritty stuff in terms of operating and fundraising. So the other thing that I've touched upon, and I'm aware of the panelists, and they've done for their organizations, great efforts to keep, especially I have to give a shout because I pay, no offense to Leslie, I haven't been tracking American Heart Association, but I'm glad she's here so she can talk about it more. And I know Randy kind of shut down the, obviously you can't do group live events for like kind of cleanup or schools, but Hawaii Food Bank has definitely done a lot of work in trying to fundraise, because usually when we don't have events and things like that, the most critical thing that people need is food, but you need money to pay for that food. And Randy and I and Leslie, I still have pictures of last December, and I missed that we cannot run around as a fruit in downtown Honolulu. But Randy and I know from sitting on the Alakai board is that fundraising is a huge part of the nonprofit for especially like the Hawaii Food Bank, because food is expensive. And, a lot of the other issues that have worried smaller nonprofits in terms of COVID is when you lose out on that fundraising, especially if you have a warehouse, a retail, or even a small office space, is having that unpleasant conversation with the landlord about rent abatement. And most eviction moratoriums across the United States do not apply to commercial leases, which a nonprofit, despite it being a nonprofit, is still on a commercial lease. And so that is one of the huge things, is people are wondering, is aid coming? Are we going to be able to stay in our lease? Or if we have to close our location, well, what does canceling a lease do? A lot of times that's a breach of contract because they're term leases. And as we are discovering for us attorneys and people who represent tenants, what we call disaster, act of God or force majeure clauses, a lot of times the insurance companies and the landlords are not exempting out the pandemic. I know, right, in terms of the government is we're shut down, locked down, quarantined, and I can't operate my business, my nonprofit, but I was like, what is the point of having this physical space if I can't operate in it? So there's that. In terms of losing out on fundraising, then begins the cycle of reducing in employees or either going to furloughs or cycling through them, and they're also working from home, the reduction in employees means less work gets done, and that in turn impacts the operating. And so can the organization fulfill its mandate or purpose? Or a lot of times when you have certain grants, funding mechanisms, or positions, well, what happens to that grant money? So there's that. I already talked about council of leases. Last two items on this, alternative fundraising and business continuity and disaster planning, are a little bit more prospective because the pandemic has certainly shed light on people's strategic plans. A lot of larger organizations that have boards and they're more advisory or kind of long-term planning have had to revise their plans because the drop in revenue, the drop in fundraising, and the lack of being able to do what you're supposed to do has made them go back to the drawing board. I'm going to ask the members to weigh in, but I know many nonprofits have sought alternative fundraising and definitely relied on more online means and methods. I don't know how effective that is compared to having, Party for a Purpose, American Heartball, things like that. It's probably not going to be a higher dollars and cents. For an attorney, though, some of these platforms are questionable to me because they kind of popped up overnight. And then on a compliance end, I was like, can they be audited? Can you track things? Because a lot of times when people donate to a 501c3, they would like the tax write-off and deductions. So a lot of that goes into the back end is the compliance part. And then finally on the business continuity and disaster planning, a lot of people have now had to, here in Hawaii, we always think about hurricane, or tidal wave. What do I do with my business or in my nonprofit? They've had to now update those plans and figure out succession planning, especially it's got a lot of people thinking if my board becomes sick and they can't make decisions, or, God forbid, somebody gets sick and passes away and they're in a key leadership role, what does our organization do? So they've also begun thinking about, as most health experts have said, is like, this won't be the only pandemic you kind of see in your lifetime. There will be times again where this comes up. Closing kind of part in terms of government aid and closing a nonprofit. This is kind of some unfortunate news. Just really quickly, if you're following the news, it's unlikely aid will come in until the Biden and Harris administration and Congress kind of settles in and the size of that aid. For Honolulu, I don't know what's going on and nobody quite can figure out. There's $887 million left of CARES Act money. I'm not Honolulu, Hawaii. CARES Act money sitting there, and it's meant to be spent in a way to directly address the problems that COVID has had. A lot of small business programs aimed throughout the beginning of the pandemic through now were also including nonprofits, and a lot of nonprofits were not sure if they qualified. And a lot of times I just said, it's better to throw in your application and then work with the financial institution or the government agency to whether or not you can, or at least because you're doing what it takes to survive. If it's a genuine and honest attempt and you think that those monies applied to you, then you would apply. But now we're kind of in a flash frozen state because of government and politics. And in terms of aid, a lot of people are looking to what has happened to the restaurant and bar industry of, should I shut down? Should I close? Should I merge or be acquired? And what I would remind them is that as a nonprofit, especially if you have a tax exemption status, the closing and merging or being acquired of your assets or what you do with your organization in a new form or whatnot is heavily regulated by the IRS and state law. Is that you can't just pass off your debts and obligations. You can't just pass off your assets. The main thing is that you would have to vet whether or not the successor organization taking over your assets kind of comports to those laws and those regulations. So it's not easy becoming a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it's also not easy exiting out. And again, you're also now dealing with a pandemic. So those are kind of things to consider is that aid isn't coming soon, and you got to close and merge. If that's on your plate, those aren't easy tasks either. So jump into the last kind of thing. What does this all mean on a day-to-day basis? Or I mean, how to kind of, I always tell my clients, and I also tell fellow board members, is it's great having meetings. It's great. Number one thing, 90% of thing is communication. But after you've communicated with your stakeholders, you should document that if you've come to decisions. I've had a lot of people who have a lot of meetings, and then I ask them about it. So what happened? I don't remember. Let me email, or like, I'll ask, always like, oh, okay, you have a vendor or supplier, or they agreed to the cancellation or rent abatement of lease. Is that in writing? No, we just talked about it, and it was with the property manager, or it was with frontline staff. And I was like, okay, that isn't going to be sufficient in a court of law. Not that I think anybody's going to sue your nonprofit, because people tend to be very charitable, pun not intended, towards looking to a nonprofit. But yeah, key things are keeping lines of communication open during a pandemic and using platforms like Zoom or conference calls. But I always say, bless the heart of somebody who is a documentarian, somebody who is sitting and taking notes and keeping people organized. Because usually what happens and what you discover is all the decisions your board made or the conversations you had with your volunteers or employees, you're going to have to transmit that to others. People like me, attorneys, people like your accountants, people like your HR professionals, and sometimes your insurance advisors is like, can we tender this situation to our insurance? Does our insurance cover the situation for a cancellation, right? So I know people are like, well, it's an attorney, but it is not without reason that we say you should communicate, but also document those key decisions when they bear fruit from those communications. And that's kind of everything in a nutshell. We will be circulating a handout that covers other things in depth and comments that I prepped for this, but I want to give enough time to our awesome panel. So switching gears. Bev, Randy, and Leslie, do you want to do a brief introduction of who you are and what you do? I know I've peppered it throughout my legal presentation, but starting off with Bev.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me today. I am with the Hawaii Food Bank. I am the director of Food Drive and Events, so I oversee our community fundraising, our events, which have now gone mostly virtual, and help with the marketing and communication. And as with other nonprofits, and I think all businesses in general, we've all kind of switched and our roles and are helping out where we can. So what used to be a pretty clear role has now blurred a little bit, and we're all helping each other out where we can.
Thank you. Thank you for, so just so you should know, Bev is the super trooper and she's awesome to work with on Alakai board, but she was the awesome, her tire blew out this morning and she still made it for our presentation. So I have to give props up to her and thank her very much. That is decision-making during crisis at the nth degree. Thanks, Bev.
Thank you, Ryan.
Dropping down to Randy. Randy, you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Randy Soriano. I am the past president of the Rotary E-Club of Hawaii, which is a volunteer organization group that is under a larger umbrella, which is the Rotary Foundation. Vocationally, I'm a marketing manager at Title Guarantee. I serve on many different boards. Typically, it's usually to be a part of their marketing communications committees. I serve with Ryan on the Alakai board for Food Bank. I'm on the marketing committee for Hawaii LGBT Legacy Foundation. And then I'll be the chair for the marketing committee for the Gift Foundation as well shortly.
And he does a remarkable and fantastic job in marketing, is always high energy. And he is also a great moderator himself.
Oh,
And
thanks.
And I love his hair, because my hair I dyed my hair that color last year, but I was like, I miss my colored hair. But anyway, let's jump down to last but not least, definitely not least, but the most important, Leslie Yano. Do you want to introduce yourself, Leslie?
Sure. I'm Leslie Yano with the American Heart Association. I'm their senior director for events like the Heart Ball, and we used to have a young professional event called Beats. So this has been a very interesting year, but I really think, as Bev kind of mentioned, it really gave us an opportunity to kind of be even more a part of the community and really see the effects that COVID-19 has had on our health and how it impacts heart, and just really, I think we're able to do more in our community. So it's exciting to be part of this panel. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you for being here as well. You're always a lovely presence on any board or any event. She makes everything fun and uplifting. So we're gonna talk about hardships, and I'm gonna direct this first at Bev, but obviously I would love Randy and Leslie's input. So Bev, how has COVID-19 affected operations, fundraising, and volunteers? I did a very topical kind of on the legal and compliance. It upends things when you cannot, it would be a violation of guidelines if you can't, interact with people. So how has that impacted you?
So as far as interaction goes, we here at the food bank are following all the CDC guidelines, making sure we're wearing our masks, gloves, sanitizing everything. So that's a little bit easier to control. But when you go out in the community and you have the communities doing fundraisers for us, like food drive-in events, in the beginning of the pandemic, we moved all of our food drives and our events virtually. So for those that still wanted to help in the community, we offered being able to set up a virtual food drive, and you can set up a direct link to this page and send it to your friends and family or the audience that you're wanting to share with, and they could essentially shop like on Amazon or a grocery shopping cart and pick the food that they would want to donate, and it would come to us virtually. As the stay-at-home order lifted and things changed and we were able to interact a little bit more, we moved up to food drives that were drop-offs. So we would ask that people come and leave the food in their trunk. Their volunteers would open the trunk, take the food out, and then there would be no face-to-face interaction. So we kind of just adjust depending on what the guidelines are out there, and just keeping safety at top priority.
Great.
Yeah.
Randy and Leslie, any comments, insights for your organizations?
Kind of similar to what Bev said, like, we are so known for events and one day kind of big events where 1,000 people gather. And even though this happened in March, we knew February 2021 would be too soon to have an in-person event. So really what we had to pivot on was starting to look at what has been the impact in Hawaii, right, with COVID and the health. And so one of the things that bubbled up was high blood pressure, because 7 out of 10 people that have been hospitalized with COVID actually had high blood pressure. But what was also happening in our communities that we saw a lot of was just a difference in economic finances, right? A lot of people were losing jobs. So how do we marry those two things together? So instead of selling tables for a ball, what we did was we really looked at, can we look at federally qualified health centers? And these health centers they're in communities that serve people that maybe don't have health insurance or have no ability to pay. So then we said, let's work with that to help improve blood pressure. Right? But we also want to make sure it's equitable, right? So there's equality and then there's equity. So I could just go to every health center and drop off blood pressure kits and say bye. And that's equality. but equity is making sure people know how to use it, that their members feel strong, their patients know what to do with it, what it means, because that can just be nebulous. What is blood pressure, right? So that's where we really started to focus on that, and that has been the biggest goal for that Heartball committee, where normally they fundraise for this one. We have high goals, or we benchmark in the top 10 of the nation, but this year we did that. We're still leading the nation, but we just switched it from tables to really looking at how we can impact the community.
Great. That was really some insightful. I love that equality and equity, especially as an attorney. Randy?
Well, I think for Rotary E-Club of Hawaii, it's a very unique situation for us, just because the organization in general is a working board, a working organization. So it's 100% volunteer led and run. So that brings unique challenges, just because when someone's not getting paid, there's no incentive, obviously, to continue the good work that we're hoping that they do. But one of the great things I think that COVID has helped us realize is that the need for giving and volunteering is so apparent still in our community. So the shift actually really helped us, because we realized that we can, as a foundation, give more to the beneficiary nonprofits that we focus on. So one of the things that we like to focus on now is really fulfilling the need within the community. One of the projects we're doing monthly is working with Hawaii Food Bank with their partnership with Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center. So we do about 2 food distributions every month with Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center. So that's been really rewarding for our members, giving them the opportunity not only to still be out there interacting with people, obviously socially distanced and safe, but still filling a need within the community. Mm-hmm. Another thing that really helped us with the shift is, and Ryan knows this very well, is he was actually a charter member of our club years back. When our club first started, we're the Rotary E-Club of Hawaii, and we were supposed to be a full digital club. We only meet virtually, and that actually shifted over the years, and we actually ended up being more of a hybrid club. But obviously with COVID, that forced us to go back to our roots, which I think has brought back a lot of our charter members, a lot of our old supporters. So that's been a benefit for us as well.
That's perfect. And this is why you're awesome moderator, because you queued up my next question. Segueing in terms of looking at an organization's mission statement. And frequently for me as an attorney, that is definitely encoded in the articles of incorporation, bylaws, and actually bleeds throughout the organization. And a lot of times for charitable organizations, it's a part of their paperwork for getting their tax exemption status. So mission is always important. I think a lot of people who are very new to volunteer and joining a board and highbrow kind of organizational are kind of shocked when they first, it's like, why are we talking about these highbrow, almost philosophical kind of things? And mission is actually very key. It's very critical. So Leslie, given what we already talked about, your kind of signature event and the things that you guys do, in what ways has your organization adapted to continue its mission?
We actually redefined our goals. So we looked at what was happening.
That's huge. Yeah. That's huge.
So we really had to look at it and just say, we have to throw away every roadmap, everything, not throw it away, but use it to guide us in a different way. So we normally have 10-year impact goals. So 2020, we were going to announce what our 2030 impact goal was. We held off. The board of directors nationally looked at it and said, let's make smaller chunks, 2024 goals, and really look at what is needed now. So when we talk about equity, right? So part of what we are looking at is that every person should have an opportunity. So keywords, even like opportunity, like semantics matter, right? It has to be very positive, and equity, equitable health for all. So it even comes down to things that we are addressing, which seems very big and nebulous, like structural racism. So what that can even mean to us, like when I think about it, is if you go to the doctor, right, and you have to fill out a form, are you male, female? What if you don't identify with any of those two things? How does that help your medical experience? Is that already bias coming in? Do you, as a patient, not feel comfortable sharing more because you've already been put in a box, right? Or even your race. Sometimes I don't understand what the difference between non-Hispanic Asian and just Asian, or, you know, I don't know how to identify with that. So those kinds of things where we have to really look at the root of what some of the language that we use are. So how we are pivoting locally is even reshaping our boards and our executive leadership teams to be more statewide. They were very event fundraising focused, right? And now we really want to be more bigger and look at the issues that we can solve in this and be really big and bold and connect with. Even today we had a call with our chief medical officer for prevention. He talked to some of our CEOs today on what COVID-19 means with our heart health and how we can make steps and change our communities. So yeah, it's exciting.
Exciting.
That's the one part, like, yeah.
At least you're still doing good work, and I'm glad you guys could pivot so readily. And they recognize this is that the 10-year plan. But again, communicating, documenting, and then, you know, does this still serve our purpose? Randy, what about you guys?
Oh yeah, I mean, very similar to Leslie. I think what we've definitely done is refocusing our goals, shifting the focus, I think, of not only our grants, but our beneficiary projects, as well as the partner nonprofits that we work with. What we wanted to focus on with our members is we took a poll, tried to find out what resonates with them, what is timely, what service projects are super relevant at the moment. Some of the things we honed in on this year is exactly what Leslie said, DEI policies and procedures within our organization. You know, since we have this extra time now, how can we educate ourselves and make Rotary in general a more inclusive organization, and really work on the intersectionalities, right, of our community. So not just race, not just age, gender. So make sure that we touch upon all of these different intersections so that the community feels welcomed in an organization that, let's be honest, when people typically think of Rotary, they think of the close to retirement or retired, I mean, I hate to say it, but old white man syndrome. So, I mean, what we really want is to break that mold and make people realize that Rotary is a welcoming organization and focus on the fact that we are a service-based organization. Some of the other things we really wanted to focus on this year is we shifted our grants to really allocate money towards the food bank with their partnership with Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center, like I said in the past. Also, we're working with, we're doing a tree planting project for the next couple of months that focuses on the environment and sustainability as well. So we just really have focused our complete attention to just things that are really timely.
Thank you, Randy. I'm glad. I had a feeling that you would be very energetic and you would still figure out a way to do tons of projects and get Rotary back on its feet. He's done a great job, and I have been out of it, and he's trying to rope me back in. So, still working on that.
It'll happen.
Okay, switching gears to Bev. How has Hawaii Food Bank, has it adapted to continue its mission? You know, beyond those operating and fundraising things, has Ron them kind of gone back to the drawing board in terms of the way to adapt the mission, given what we're facing?
Sure. I think for us, since the stay-at-home order was implemented back in March, the demand for food has increased nearly 60%, and that's the 5th highest increase in food security in the United States. And so for us, it's how do we continue to expand our mission, which is to provide safe food access for everyone and account for this increase in needs. So we've had to really figure out how to meet this increasing supply. So what we've done is, in addition to, we work with nearly 200 partner agencies that distribute food on a regular basis. So in addition to that, we've added mass distributions and pop-up distributions all over the island, mostly in rural areas, to give safe food access to everyone. And so for us, how we've had to adapt is we've had to essentially bring in more food, and how we've done that is through purchasing. this past since April, I believe we've spent about $6.5 million on purchasing food when our annual budget is about $400,000 a year. We've also established partnership with the Hawaii Farm Bureau and the Hawaii Longline Association to purchase local produce and source local fish so that we can not only help those that are in need, but also help sustain our local economy by having those kinds of partnerships. So we're constantly trying to think of innovative ways to not only feed the people that are in need, but also continue to sustain these local partnerships so that we're still feeding into the local economy because, you know, since we're hoping tourism comes back, but we're expecting that the need for food is going to continue well into next year. And so we're just trying to plan for that.
Well, I mean, even before COVID hit, the mission for Hawaii Food Bank was already difficult. We already would talk about that people's impression of Hawaii Food Bank was it's just for the homeless, and they didn't realize how many families actually still go hungry even on a lower income. And yeah, you guys have done a great job in kind of pivoting and adapting too. So I also do, as a small business attorney, I love it when people support local and support small businesses like our farmers. It's difficult. It's difficult, and we all need to kind of work together. Jumping gears of what has happened, Randy, what are your plans for the rest of this year as we close out and as we look towards 2021? We have 2 vaccines coming. Obviously, their distribution is not going to be immediate, but it looks like we'll be having 2 vaccines by the end of the year by Moderna and Pfizer.
Of course. So, I mean, even with the upcoming vaccine and the anticipation for that, I think COVID has been almost a blessing in disguise for us. It's really forced us to think out of the box and think of innovative ways to continue our fundraising and events. So I think our board in general wants to continue in that forward motion and just come up with a strategic plan for 2021 that really just elevates us and keeps us in that virtual realm. Because to be honest, we want to take obviously the conservative route. We don't want to just assume that everything's going to go back to normal. We are just anticipating that this is the new normal, right? So a lot of that is where our decisions are going to be leaning towards. Also, we want to partner really closely with our 3 beneficiary nonprofits, which is Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center, Ho'olanapua, and Hawaii LGBT Legacy Foundation. A lot of their planning for 2021 will obviously mold our plans for that year as well. We anticipate partnering with Triple HRC with their food distributions, obviously because that's going to be super relevant and probably continue into 2021. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just really staying the course and making sure that we are still visible within the community and we give our members that value proposition to stay members, especially since we are a working board and working organization of volunteers.
Well, again, great stewardship by you. And I just have a quick question. I was like, I cannot remember it because I was drafted the bylaws, but is there still a requirement for annual meeting in December and like everybody?
So we actually had to revise our bylaws completely. So what we normally do now is our bylaws require a board retreat, which is in June.
Okay.
Virtually now. And then all of the decisions, the approval of the budget, the approval of the bylaws, revisions, approval for the strategic plan for the upcoming fiscal year, all gets reviewed then. And then in December at our mid-year point, that's when we do a virtual at-large meeting for all membership. But really what we're doing this year is doing an online vote for our incoming board.
Okay. Yeah. So the only reason why is lawyer curiosity. As I said, I drafted it and they're allowed to do that, revise it. I was just curious because Randy, the way the organization run is exactly kind of highbrow and kind of strategic decision making is usually a part of the annual meeting. But in terms of policies, committees, subcommittees, and carrying out the functions of the organization are sometimes done based on policy and procedures and resolutions, which are a little bit more mutable. But in terms of what has to get done or put on an agenda is a lot of times in the bylaw level. Enough of legalese and lawyering. Leslie, what are the plans for the rest of the year and the beginning of 2021?
Well, we'll still be living in this virtual world, so you'll probably still see me on your cameras. And even our events will just continue that way as well. I mean, everything we do is science-based, so it really, again, depends on like CDC guidelines, everything that comes out. But really, too, and our main shift is going to just continue being what the needs of the community are based on how our science can help move that along, right? So we talked about the hypertension, but also food insecurity, right, is a big part of your health, your heart health. So looking at that, we really have always been a part of advocacy work. So really championing, making sure like people have access to the food stamps and knowing that you can actually get twice the amount if you buy produce, you know, so that is something that's really important to your heart health, and working with food prescriptions with some of these with some of these federally qualified health centers. So where people, when they're getting their checkups, they can actually get a prescription to get more fruits and vegetables, and that can be used to really bring access into areas that they might not know. So that's kind of it for us.
Exciting. And you can hear, this will be recorded and shared, by the way, for if any of you have friends that want to see this and couldn't make it. But I'm going to put a promise. I will dress up as a fruit or vegetable again on a virtual event with you so we can hang out. But you have
Okay, it's recorded.
Yeah, you have yeah, so it's a promise. It's a recorded promise. So anyway, you just let me know and I will happily dress up.
Oh, I will.
With you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember, what were you again last year?
I did many outfit changes. I was a heart sometimes.
That's right, of course. All right, Bev, where is the food bank heading for the rest of the year and then for 2021?
For the rest of the year, we are, same for the rest of the year as to next year. I think we're anticipating the needs to continue to go well into 2021. So we are just going to make sure that we have enough supply to meet these mass distributions and the need, and continue into 2021. As far as fundraising and events go, we'll still continue to utilize all of the digital platforms that we've kind of switched over to, the text to give, the virtual fundraising and food drives, and then continue to find other innovative ways to fundraise. This week we did a You Can Cook series where we are working with local chefs in Hawaii who are willing to teach us how to cook with things that are in our pantry. So we're really excited about that. And just continuing to find creative and innovative ways to help fundraise and also maintain our inventory.
Great. In terms of that, I'm going to keep on you because we have you jumping down to the last question. Is what is the best way for the community to connect with you, to donate, volunteer, or what the needs are great of not just the people and community, but you guys as nonprofits helping and servicing the local community and others, whether it be health, whether it be food, or in general, just educating and kind of helping people, whether it be some type of cleanup or schools or education. So Bev, what is the best way for people to communicate, for the community to connect with you, to donate or volunteer for the food bank?
We've been really active on social media throughout all this. So I think, the best way for the community to connect with us is For those that are active on social media, to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, because not only is it a way for them to connect with us to find out how to donate and to volunteer, but it's also a way to find out when our distribution schedules are coming out, so that if they find themselves in need or know anyone that might be in need of food, that's also the best way to find out. A more direct way is to email volunteer@hawaiifoodbank.org. And then also our main phone number is 836-3600. And from there, we can always direct any questions to, whether it's wanting to make a donation, wanting to get involved, wanting to host a food drive, or asking, where's the best place to get food if someone needs it. That would be the best place to connect with us.
Great. Randy?
Same. I think the best way to connect with us would be social media. We post pretty regularly. That's the best way to find out our upcoming projects. We also have fellowship meetings once a month, every first Monday of the month. And then we also have a happy hour for our members every Thursday at 6 p.m. So if you're interested in just getting to know our members or learning more about our service projects or our partner nonprofits, feel free to visit us on social media. Our handle is Rotary eClub HI.
And Leslie.
Okay, so we're a little more old school and we love phone calls because we love to engage people. So the best way is to call our main line because we just have so many different opportunities and we love to get to know everyone. Or our website too has more information, our localized website.
I don't judge one where I was like, I mean, I still don't mind having a letter. Before COVID, we would get walk-ins as a law firm,
Yeah.
and it's like you have to schedule a consult. But anyway, that's great. I will probably call that line and ask, can I speak to Leslie? I'm just kidding.
That's fine.
Is there any other parting words, last comments? Because we're going to open up to questions, and I think we have about 6 to 7 minutes left. I just want to take this time to thank you guys for spending your lunch with me. And especially, like I said, Bev, I was like, health and safety and is the most important thing. I'm glad you were able to get your car towed and made it safely into the office. But all of you, thank you for spending your time. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for bringing life to all the legalese into practical day-to-day affairs and running your nonprofits. And yeah, thank you for being in my life and letting me help you guys or working and interacting with you. So again, thank you. Thank you for joining us in my law firm's nonprofit November. I love alliterations, as everybody knows.
Thank you. This is fun. I love talking.
That's why we're friends.
Thank you,
So any last things? We do have a quick, I see one question. If there are any others, please go ahead and ask them in the question and answer. But I think you guys did, especially Leslie, and touched a little bit on the Hawaii Food Bank side. But Julie asks, is what are you all doing to support the health and well-being of our communities? If you want to kind of recap or at least add in some other insight, any one of you can jump in on that. Thank you, Julie, for the question.
I think for us, we're really mindful about what type of food is getting distributed. So having access to fresh local produce and honestly, a huge reason why that shift happened was through a partnership with the American Heart Association, who really were the experts on helping guide us and share with us the science behind eating healthier. And so, we moved and made a shift towards asking for healthier food donations and lower sodium, learn simple things like, washing your beans before you eat them to lower the sodium intake. So we share that with our recipients and our and with the community, and then like I said, with the fresh produce and the access to healthy food, we believe that not only is it important to feed the community, but it's important to feed them healthy food as well.
Great. Again, the question was, what are you all doing to support the health and well-being of our communities? Randy or Leslie? You guys do a lot of great things, but I think they just wanted to have you guys, if there are anything else specific that you got to miss out earlier in the discussion.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, specifically with our club, one of our main focuses and one of the reasons why we chose Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center is just because we're really into integrated health services, specifically for marginalized communities like the LGBTQIA plus community, as well as the houseless community here in Hawaii. So a lot of our projects are based around that thought process about working with mental health, working with houselessness, and marginalized communities. So one of the ongoing projects we do work on is Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction has an outreach program that goes out weekly, and they actually provide hygiene and like emergency kits for the houseless community, which has like soap, toothbrushes, wound care kits. So every month we try to get together and we try to create about 100 to 200 kits that they are distributed with that program. So that's really amazing with that that specific program. Other things that we try to focus on with our partnership with Ho'olanapua, we have created a craft corner with one of our grants for Ho'olanapua that will be utilized within their art therapy sessions. And that's really to focus on women and children that are victims of sex trafficking and helping them cope with their PTSD. We have a lot of creative and artistic people in our club, so they totally advocate the use of art in like alternative therapies. So those are just some of the things that we try to work with.
Great. Leslie?
I think, we are just really going to continue to see the needs of the community, and again, really impact like the health, especially in areas that need us the most. I think that's where we really want to bring our science to life. So what we loved with our partnership with the food bank too was taking our national science and making like local recipes, or, having small steps to make big lifestyle changes is really what we want to continue on. And so I think it's all collective impact. So continuing to work with the community as well.
Perfect.
Brian, can I add one more thing?
Sure, of course.
The health. At our mass distributions, we've also set up pre-registration to minimize, face-to-face contact. We load the food in the trunk so no one gets out of the car, and we provide all our volunteers with the PPE that's necessary when we're at our volunteers. So in addition to the long-term health for our recipients, we're really concerned and make it top priority for the immediate health of our recipients when we're interacting with them at the mass distributions as well.
We're about time, but that triggered a question by me to ask you guys. Do you guys mind giving an extra 5 minutes? If not, I know participants and attendees, you might have only budgeted an hour, but Bev brought up something and I just kind of, again, the lawyer in me can't shut it off, but, and you guys don't need to answer this, but just a really quick question, which might not necessarily have an easy answer, but have you guys dealt with resistance to your efforts in compliance with the CDC guidelines or the state and city? Because you had mentioned as wearing masks or things like that. If you have, what have been successful strategies in kind of, going into the communities or helping the community, or, even working with volunteers?
For us, it's not so much resistance, it's sometimes people aren't aware. So for us, we saw that as a need to increase in communication. So every opportunity we've had to share what the expectations are as far as if you're going to volunteer with us or if you're going to receive food, we include the guidelines as far as wearing the mask, wearing your mask, staying in the car, and things like that. So for us, it's just being able to make sure that we can communicate it on all channels so that it reaches the largest audience.
I mean, for us, I think that's why we did go virtual, a lot of things, right? So we didn't, but we're science. So we promote everything, social distancing, CDC. So we have a lot of like even resources for external and internal of really how to be safe. So exactly what Bev is saying, like we just want everyone safe and we just really have to follow those guidelines. And I think most people understand that about American Heart Association. So it's never really been any pushback, but we really help encourage it. So if anyone needs cute little PSAs, let us know.
Randy, before you jump in, we have one more last question. I think it'll be a short one and that's it. But if you want to kind of answer my question, if you have any insights or comments.
I mean, it's pretty similar to both Bev and Leslie. I think we've just, most of our volunteers are pretty willing and able to follow the CDC guidelines. Our board specifically has added extra just layers in terms of security, and we bring a thermometer obviously with us to every volunteer site. We're pretty strict with the 5-person rule in terms of volunteers. So we've either created shifts or we've like separated different volunteer locations. And then depending on if we are working with a beneficiary nonprofit like Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction or Ho'olanapua, we also abide by whatever rules they have as well.
Yay for policies and procedures or rules. Sorry, anyway, quick question. We have this, and this will be the last one and close out. One of our attendees asked, is there any physical activities you offer to the community to keep the community healthy? Any one of you or all of you actually?
We do. I mean, because that's a big part of it, right? Physical activity and heart health and brain health is a huge part of our pillars. It's been hard, so we have to recommend more family kind of safe gatherings, right? Nothing that we would encourage people to come together for. Everything went more virtual, but we encourage like scavenger hunts or different things that you can do with your family, kind of. A big thing has been pets and your heart health, because there is science that link cardiovascular health and owning a pet. And so walking with your pets too also can become a very heart healthy activity.
I'm gonna drop my dog off here, please.
Okay.
I mean, if anyone wants to volunteer at our distributions, it's a pretty good workout. You're lifting 50 to 60 pounds of food into a trunk for 5 hours straight. So there's that physical aspect too. Also volunteering, it's healthy for you too because you're getting in your steps and all that too.
Maybe I can convince the firm, or at least I miss the gym, so I need a workout. So lifting, moving, that sounds great too at the food bank. Randy?
Exact same as Bev. I think since we help with the Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction and Hawaii Food Bank distributions, honestly, it's a very huge workout, especially when 90% of your club doesn't like lifting things and they assume that you love lifting things. So you get voluntold to carry the heavier boxes.
Voluntold, I missed that phrase, but that's, I think it's proliferated some of my my friends' mainland boards, but I was exposed to that early on in Hawaii's nonprofit culture, and actually in the league, I was like voluntold. Thanks, Randy. I'm glad you guys are all healthy and safe. I'm glad your organizations are succeeding during these difficult times, and I'm very appreciative of your guys spending a little bit over 5 minutes over of your lunch break with me. Virtual round of applause for Bev, Randy, and Leslie of Hawaii Food Bank, Rotary E-Club of Hawaii, and American Heart Association, respectively. I'm Ryan K. Hugh of Hugh and Bordenave and managing partner. And this webinar has been presented by me and my law firm for our nonprofit November month celebration. If you have any questions or further follow-up, we'll be distributing materials. Hopefully you can screen grab. We're going to be throwing this video up on YouTube, and yeah, use your social medias. And if you must, you also can call us and we can redirect you and speak to you on the phone and let you know where these materials are. Again, thank you. Stay healthy and safe, everybody. And thank you, my panel.
Thank you.